Stay hungry, stay foolish.
So now on the Innovation Show, it's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Paul White, author of Rising Above the Toxic Workplace. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. I'd love if you would first, before we talk about toxic workplaces and the strategies to deal with them, if you would tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, as people probably can tell from my accent, I'm from the U.S., and I'm from the Midwest part, and I'm a psychologist by training. And one of the things I've done for the last 15 or 20 years is consult with family-owned businesses here in the States, dealing with the family and relational issues that are intertwined with both working together and then passing it across generations, because that's a major challenge here. And through that, I was introduced and sought out Dr. Gary Chapman, who's the author of a pretty famous book. It's called The 5 Love Languages. It sold like 13 million copies. And he and I worked together to apply the concepts to work-based relationships and wrote, co-authored a book called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. And I have an online assessment that goes with it and training stuff. And I go around and speak and work with organizational leaders. And when I was doing that, people at breaks and afterwards would come up and tell me sort of negative stories about their workplace or what a jerk their boss was. And, that happens, but it just kept coming at me. And I'm like, wow, this is pretty intense. So we have a pretty big list on our newsletter. And so we send out questions and ask people to share stories. And we were just overwhelmed with hundreds and hundreds of stories. And so wound up following up with them and interviewing people and doing some research. And that's how we came up with the book. And, I didn't want to just describe a toxic workplace. I mean, that's okay, but it's like, how do you survive this, or how do you get past it? And that was really our goal. I'm not about trying to make people victims. I mean, there are bad things that happen for sure, but we got to figure out how to get past it. And so that was the goal.
Yeah, and that's what really struck me, Paul, actually, was you and your team as well. Like it comes across that you really want people to deal with this in a positive way and come out of it. And you call out lots of strategies, but also, deciding when it's time to walk away, etc. Before we even get into that, it'd be great to talk about, some of the examples, because we can talk about toxic workplaces, but it's the stories I felt that really get across. Is this you? It was almost they were like case studies in themselves. And if you would give us a couple of examples, that'd be great, Paul.
Sure. Well, one of the things, and what's interesting to me at least, is that when you write a book, it's a time limited kind of thing. I mean, you got a deadline, you got to get done. Well, you keep learning after that. And so we kept learning, and we actually developed a training program to deal with, both to avoid becoming a toxic workplace and to deal with it. And in that process, we found that there are really three main components of a toxic workplace. One is most toxic workplaces have sick systems, meaning that the structure in the organization isn't set up correctly for good communication, for healthy decision-making processes, for holding people accountable for their jobs, and versus them sort of skating and getting by and being able to blame or make excuses. And so here in the States, that there are some places that sort of repeat that pattern, unfortunately. I mean, university and college settings you got sort of multiple reporting relationships, hospitals, government agencies, public schools, long-term care facilities for older adults. And so, if you don't have good communication, not much good happens after that. So you've got to get that going. And then secondly, we found that most places that were pretty toxic had toxic leaders. And we can talk about and unpack that. But basically, they're people, and these are not incompetent people. That's different. Somebody who's, new or doesn't really know what they're doing. These people are evil. I mean, they are bad news. And they only care about themselves. I mean, that's the one way to say about it. They use everybody else in every situation for their benefit, and they're pretty good at it, actually, lots of times. And then the third component are dysfunctional colleagues. And, I'm a psychologist, and we label people and diagnose people, and I sort of react to that sometimes, but dysfunctional truly is descriptive. DYS means problem. Functional means, can you function in daily life? And these people just have a way about thinking about and going about life that just doesn't work. that they sort of don't match reality as far as accepting responsibility for your choices, learning from mistakes. Uh, they're great at blaming people and making excuses and setting up other people having conflicts and that kind of stuff. So those are huge. And I guess I say that because the first story that comes to mind is I was part of over here a nonprofit organization to serve people, and the leader just was a piece of work, man. He was very talented, very verbal, very social, very engaging, and he sort of hoodwinked you. I don't know if you know that term, but he sort of like scammed you when you didn't know it. And he makes you, if you believe him, he makes you feel like you're important, but he does it to everybody, and he doesn't have a relationship. And it was an image, and that's one of the deal about sort of toxic leaders. They are really focused on what looks good and looks right. It's not about doing right. It's not about being right. It's about making things look good. And most of their energy goes into that. And so, and they, one of the interesting things we found is that toxic leaders have some strengths. I mean, they look good initially. Otherwise, they wouldn't get the job, right? I mean, unless they get it from their parent in a family. But generally, they come across pretty good. And it takes a while to sort of get underneath what's going on and see their game. And then you can see, man, this is not going well. And they sort of they either take down people with them or sometimes even the organization, because they're not really living according to reality, that, you got to make more money than you spend and all that kind of stuff.
I found it really interesting that you talked about their values and their outwardly meaning. For example, can say one thing and then, backstage in the workplace, totally different practices are at play.
Absolutely. Yeah. These people, it's all about the image and looking good, and you better not make them look bad in public or you are going down. That's just one thing you don't do. But yeah, they'll be all kind and sweet and all that, out in public, but then they will tear people up. They're very condescending and critical. As a psychologist, I'm a little bit leery of overusing diagnostic terms, but in our culture and in the world, people are using the word narcissism a lot. And from a psychological point of view, a narcissistic personality disorder is a very specific thing. But essentially, it comes from a Greek god, a myth about a god who basically spent all day looking at himself in the mirror and just wanted people to compliment him. And that's what these people are about. They are all about themselves. Other people are there to be used for their benefit. People are essentially resources for these individuals. And just like, a computer or, cash or whatever. And so they don't really care about other people except as how to help them achieve their goals. And they will take credit for anything good that happens, whether they were involved or not. And the better ones are sort of like Teflon. I mean, things don't stick to them, or bad things, and they can pass it off. And they're very good. You have to be careful if you work for these people. They will attach bad things to you so that you go down versus them. I mean, loyalty, the only person they're loyal to is themselves. They're not loyal to the organization. They'll leave the organization in a heartbeat if there's a better, opportunity for them. And in fact, these people are pretty good at jumping organizations fairly quickly before things are going to get exposed, and then they move on.
Yeah, like when you describe them in the book as well, this image of a locust came to my head, where they're just going around and using up both people and resources, and just making themselves look great, and then leaving a mess behind. And then the people who are left to clean up the mess are broken by their I'm doing air quotes here, leadership term. Yeah. But I'm delighted you mentioned narcissism, because I've heard the term lots of times, and it's not something that people really delve into unless they're in your field. But when you described it in so many times as a toxic leader, and then you described a narcissist, it made total sense, because you can actually identify the characteristics of a narcissist. Would you mind going into that a little bit more? Because people will identify, I suppose, some of the traits of a narcissist.
Sure. A narcissist is somebody that is focused on themselves. Now, they will take an organization, and they will adopt an organization's goals, but their goals really are the goals for themselves. And if the organization can help them get there, they're sort of using the organization as a train to get to the next station. And so they're always going to, the conversations are going to be about them. They're going to want to lead the meetings, and, heaven help the person that tries to, take over a meeting from them, because they will just absolutely tear you up and rip you up in front of other people, and have no compunction about it at all. I mean, it's like, do not challenge me. You do, and you will die. I mean, figuratively, obviously, but, and also, I mean, they're egocentric. They are I-centered, and they basically believe they are the best at what they do in the world. They are the smartest person in the room, if not the hemisphere. They know better than anybody else what to do. And anybody that gives an opposing option in public, at least, will, be poo-pooed. Now, that person, the leader, may actually adopt the suggestion later, but he or she will make it look like their own. And in fact, they are great at taking other people's ideas and taking credit for it, and spinning it and keep going. So they're condescending and critical. They expect you to meet their needs. You are there for them, and so and anything bad that happens really is somebody else's mistake, or just that they were stupid, that they didn't think about it. And so, yeah. I don't know. I hope you get the flavor of it. I mean, and they can be nice too. I mean, they can be nice on the surface, but behind the scenes, it's sort of like one of the Alien movies or whatever that comes out. It's just pretty nice.
I think it'd be great to explain as well, because this really made sense to me. Is so they can make you feel important, but then also take away your power. Now, I know we'll talk about some of the solutions and strategies to deal with it in a few minutes, but I thought this was really interesting, that they can make people feel that they're lucky to have a role, or they're lucky to be part of this great vision, and they'll chip away. It's almost like a kind of perverted skill that they have. And it'd be great to tell our audience a bit about that.
Yeah. So, again, they're master manipulators, and they manipulate both information. So they withhold information, they control information so that they can release it when they want, to whom they want, including the media. And they also manipulate people. And so they're good at making you, feel good about, hey, you did this well. And they'll even praise you in front of somebody else. As long as they're initiating it, it's okay. But it's because it's like a chess game, right? They're sort of making a move here and putting the bishop out there. And yet they've got to be in control. And when they don't feel in control, that's when they're dangerous. And you have to understand that even though in some ways you might feel sort of part of the team or whatever, you are always at risk, because they have no loyalty to you. They don't care about you except as far as you helping them achieve their goals. And so anyone is always expendable around them. And they're pretty good at setting up situations that other people will take the fall or can go down if you're not doing what they want.
Gotcha. And I suppose I probably should have started off the show giving a bit of context of this, because I read the book and I thought it was so key for our audience. So our audience are a lot of kind of mavericks or change makers, entrepreneurs, but also people who work in startups. And I felt, the profile of a narcissist, or even a toxic workplace, can happen at a small level. So it's a small, startup type environment, and that people may have skin in the game, and that they're locked in with some stock or something like that. So they kind of feel a little bit like they've golden handcuffs on. And it'd be great to give a bit of context on that from your experience of those type of organizations.
Yeah, I'm 60. I turned 60 this fall, and I've done different things in my career and worked in different kinds of professional strategic partnerships and all that. And one of the things that I've learned is, because I've worked with, high-level financial advisors with, billionaires and all that kind of stuff. and a lot of people, you see the elephant, right? I mean, you want to take out the big game and you go for it versus sort of checking out to see if this person has any kind of history. It's better to walk with people a little ways. At least 6 months or so often can tell you some stuff versus just throwing in all at once. So, I mean, sometimes it's too late in the game, but if you're looking at getting into a partnership or whatever, walk alongside with a person in a more limited capacity or relationship first, sort of see how they deal with things and all that, and then move on. Because here's what you got to do if you work for a narcissist. First of all, you have to do your job, because if you don't, they'll call you out and take you down. So you've got to focus on your job, not what they're doing and all the shenanigans you see around in the background. Because if you don't, you'll be blamed and you'll take the fall. Secondly, what you have to do is you got to understand these people are out for themselves. So you've got to document conversations, you got to document decisions made. And so an relatively easy way to do that is, let's say you have a meeting and you send them a follow-up email and say, from our conversation, this is what I understand what you want me to do, blah, 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 blah. And then if that's not the case, please inform me. Because that way the onus is on them to correct your understanding or misunderstanding. Otherwise, you're doing what, you understood you're supposed to do. And if it's in important meetings, you got to have somebody else there. I mean, especially, as much as you can, because it's always going to be his word versus, or his or her word versus yours. And you're not going to, sort of be at the same level of public adulation that they are, and people are going to believe them. And then the last thing, you have to be defended. You have to take care of yourself. You have to play defense, because you got to set limits on what you're willing and not willing to do. They will use you up and throw you away in a heartbeat. And you go down and your family goes down and everything you've earned goes down. So you've always got to have a defensive posture somewhere in the game. Otherwise, you're really at risk. And there are good-hearted people out there. I've worked in mental health things for a long time, and we want people to change. Do not expect these people to change. They may, if it's going to take an act of God, literally, but, don't expect them to change. Don't expect them to honestly praise you, and clearly don't take their criticism personally, because you are just one of many targets. It's not about you. It's about them and their goal, and you just happen to be in the way. So you're going to take the bullet just because you're there. But it's not that you're a bad person or incompetent. They're just using it to get what they want.
So say, let's look for prevention rather than cure. So say a kid or, somebody, a college graduate's gone into a role, or there's a startup and it's really, because from what you said about narcissists, they have great energy and they sell the vision really well. And it's not until, a little bit later that you discover, what have I done here? And how can somebody prevent that? What are the telltale signs that they can look out for?
Man, I wish I do. I'd sell 1 billion books on that, man. But if I
let's co-author that one, man.
Yeah,
I'll co-author that one.
I think it's less about the narcissist and more about having good decision-making skills. And for any of us, regardless of how old or young, experienced or inexperienced we are, go slow, keep your eyes open, get input from other people. Don't think you know everything. I mean, I have the opportunity to work with very successful business people and sort of take their life history and find out what makes them successful. And one of the key aspects is that the people that are successful have a learning attitude. And that you're willing to learn and listen, and you have maybe a mentor or at least a sounding board of saying, this is going on. Tell me sort of what do you think about this? It seems a little gray to me. I'm not sure, because little gray turns into a lot of gray, and then it turns into you're over the line. And so it's more about having sort of checkpoints, about not throwing all in all at once, even though it's the greatest deal that ever happened on the face of the earth. And if it is, sign, I'll have something you can sign to give me all your money as well. I mean, it's, you just got to have some wisdom. in it. But the other thing is, pay attention to early warning signs. I mean, lots of times we want to believe that they're good and that we're not seeing the right thing, but pay attention to and maybe even keep a list somewhere of this doesn't sort of match. They said this and then they did this and not exactly, what they said. I mean, I was in a situation once where this guy, I was part of a team and he was a salesman and he made a promise to a big organization that I knew we had not done and we could not do. And I'm like, I don't want to be part of this. So does that make sense? I mean, you sort of, you got to pay attention to the early warning signs and don't just totally dismiss them because you think this guy's or gal's, golden.
Yeah. And then I suppose what happens as well, and you talked about this, is like the fur-lined mousetrap of how do I get out here? I'm after, moving career here and I have my mortgage to pay. I don't have the support of my spouse to move roles, or I don't have the ability. I'm a single mom or father and I can't do this, or else how does this look on my CV? And it's those kind of things that trap people a little bit, right?
Yeah. And I got some great advice from a business associate once, and he said, try to always, there's a great book called Margin, Dr. Richard Swinson, and he just talks about how we don't leave margin in our lives, whether it's time or money or energy. And, things don't always go right. You got to be able to, sort of deal with a problem, whether it's your car goes down or whatever it is. And that he said, try not to get in a situation where you're at risk for being desperate, because when you're desperate, you make bad decisions. So it's sort of, again, sort of walking wisely over time and taking steps that, and in this situation, sometimes you gotta take a loss to get out of going bankrupt, right? I mean, it's better to lose 10,000 pounds than 500,000 and the whole deal. And in some ways, it doesn't matter what people think or what it looks like, because staying true to who you are and what is right and good over time will win out, especially in the court of public opinion. If you're always trying to make decisions to look good, you're screwed, to be honest, because, public opinion changes. And so now you went down this road and you're trying to look good versus doing the right thing, serving people, providing good services, good quality products at a fair and reasonable price, treating your employees well. That'll get you someplace. It won't get you rich all of a sudden, but it'll be a good life over a long period of time.
Yeah, and I guess it depends on what your definition of wealth is as well. But
yeah, absolutely.
Before we look at some of the strategies, the survival strategies, and what steps we should look at, it'd be great to talk about different. So I suppose there we kind of talk about big corporates, for example, or small entrepreneurial startups. But the other one then you talk a lot about is kind of public bodies of civil service operations, including education and religious services, etc., or public funded companies, that they often have a massive amount of bureaucracy. And from, a lot of our audience would be entrepreneurs or people, change makers within those organizations. And they are often mired by the bureaucracy, the politics, the Machiavellian tactics that go on. What advice do you have for those type of people?
Oh, wow. It's God bless them. Because I've been there. It's a tough road, but I guess one thing is you have to be, especially in whether it's a very mission-driven organization, whether that's a not-for-profit that's about the environment or helping the poor, if it's a religious thing or education. You've got to be careful that the mission-driven organizations will sort of use that as a trump card, that they keep asking more and more, and it's like, aren't you committed to them? Don't you want to see this happen? Meanwhile, you're working your buns off and dying, and you don't see your family, and again, not intentionally, but these places will sort of use you up, and then you maybe leave on your own because you're just, you're a rag now, and then they bring somebody else in, and it's just a turnstile, and you just keep going in. And so you've got to set some limits. And yeah, there's a mission, but you're a limited person. You have only so much time, energy, and other resources, and you got to prioritize that. And it's not all about, from my point of view, at least, I mean, making the world better. If I die as a person, whether that's physically or internally, or if I don't, can't maintain a healthy family and friends. So that's one. And you got to be careful about sort of getting sucked into the mission and letting it, suck you dry that way. The other thing is you got to look at really realistic goals of what you can and can't change and what you're willing to do that, because it's pretty rare. I mean, it happens, but to be able to sort of find this unique, perfect storm of circumstances and economics and so forth, and personality and changes in leadership to make a huge transformation in a big organization, more likely you're able to, sort of transform a part. And as that works, it then touches other parts that it can transform as well. And so I think a key for entrepreneurs is you've got to have some colleagues. You cannot do it on your own. You'll sort of just crash and burn. I think my experience is that you've got to find people that are like-minded, that you share the same values and potentially the same goals, and you just sort of work the plan where you are, and slowly, and sometimes maybe more quickly, but watch it grow. But you've got to have a team of buddies and gals with you that share the load, because you get worn out, you get discouraged, and then somebody else, picks it up for a while, and then it's a bit of a tag team, and then it's your turn. So.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of, those electric cars when you go in and you plug in for a while, and it's almost that group is your energy plug, and you kind of share off each other's energy. And as you say, somebody else goes in and gets worn down for a while and takes one for the team.
Yeah, exactly.
And okay, so the other one I thought was really interesting was if you kind of go down a layer now and you talk about the Peter principle. For example, somebody who's a brilliant salesperson all of a sudden gets put as the MD or the business unit leader, and they're not exactly, just because they're good at their job does not mean they're a leader.
Right. And, and the other part, to go back about toxic leaders, toxic leaders are not always at the top of the organization. Lots of times the top leaders are really quite good and healthy, but you've got these toxic people, and maybe they're a vice president or a manager or a division manager or something, and their unit is just not going well. So I just want to clarify that it doesn't have to be at the top of the organization. But yeah, the other thing is, and again, I think this has to do with sort of sick systems, is having a good process for giving people additional responsibility. I mean, essentially a promotion is giving person more responsibility with more resources, but you're holding them accountable for those. And so a healthy system will help a person work up and demonstrate wise leadership and decision-making and team work. And if it doesn't work, they don't get promoted further and they may even lose it, versus, I tell you, the healthiest organizations that I've seen, especially the healthy big ones, is that they don't hire outside leadership very often until maybe late in the game, after they are a very mature, established company, that they train people up and let people demonstrate, and they reward responsibility with additional privileges and benefits and so forth, versus hiring some star gun that comes out and is supposed to do everything right. That just seems really risky to me from a values point of view and even cultural point of view, from having somebody match your company's values and culture, even though they may be a great technician. In fact, I don't remember. I've written a couple of books, Toxic Achievers. I don't know if we talked about those. Toxic Achievers are a fascinating group because they are like the bright stars professionally. They are the best salesperson or technician or whatever what they do, but they kill everybody else around them while they're doing it. They're just poison. And so, and in our where I grew up, there's black walnut trees, and they go really big, and they can throw off a whole bunch of walnuts. But their roots put off a toxin that nothing else can grow around them. And so you can either choose to have a whole bunch of walnuts and nothing else, or you can not have walnuts and have other things. And that's sort of what a toxic achiever is like. They'll produce, man. They can sell more than anybody else, but they also want more benefits than what the contract pays for. They want other people to do their paperwork for them. They want special, accommodations or, side deals that nobody else gets, but because they're the star, they think they should get it. And boy, talk about creating a toxic environment. All kinds of resentment and just bad things happen when those people are around.
And are they narcissists, those people? So, say, for example, you have the narcissist at the top, who's the leader, who's very clearly matches all those characteristics you spelled out. But then the black walnut character, they might not be so overt in their narcissism. Is
Right.
it narcissism, or is it just pure selfishness?
I think it's more selfishness. I mean, it's just, and they're cocky, they're good and they know they're good, and they've somehow gotten, either by accident sometimes, and sometimes a plan, they've gotten themselves into a position where the company really would have a hard time. It would be hurtful to the company to function without them, at least for a while, whether because of a skill and knowledge base or relationships or whatever. And so they sort of have a power position. And, the leaders, the organizational leaders may be afraid, well, we can't lose this salesperson because, they're the people connected with, our major customer or whatever. But I've seen time and time, if you don't get rid of them, you will never have a healthy organization, because they will they're going to have a revolving door around them as far as assistants and other people they work with on their team. And often when you get rid of them, you find out that the customer was uncomfortable with them too. But, he or she was there with you, and they didn't, want to go around them. So my proposition is you got to get rid of them. And it can be costly for a while. You got to count the cost and figure out how you're going to get through the storm. But then you can rebuild and create some healthy environment there.
Yeah, so it's kind of like they haven't let other people flourish as well. So if we take the idea of the black walnut, they haven't let some of their saplings come in around them. They keep stamping them out, so they are the kingpin, and they're kept on that pedestal.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, so and then I suppose then there's your reaction. So this is all the stuff that's happening, and then I thought this was interesting because I've actually been here, and I don't mind admitting this, where you get in a bad place. In sport, for example, when you get injured, and you kind of get into this bad mindset of complaining, not being picked or whatever. And I felt, you talk about poisoning the well, and often you get toxic cliques around an organization, and people kind of go, just steer clear of them. Don't look at them. Don't let them see you. And in a way, though, you got to look, when you're pointing the finger, there's three fingers pointing back at you. You got to go, am I actually contributing towards the well poison? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, and it's easy to get drawn in, it's not, we've all been there, right? Where it's sort of like, this is not really healthy, but you sort of think it's funny. And so you go along with the joke that's off color or whatever. You've got to, I think one of the first places to start is to not contribute to the negative, right? And we always have to look at what we have to do. It's like, they did this, but I got a choice now. I can either go off. I can, there's all kinds of extremes I could go, or I could just sort of wait. I can, try to go someplace else, whatever. You've always got a choice. And so one choice is not to contribute to the negative. So if that means not saying anything, not reacting, then that's what it is. Sometimes, you go into a workplace and people are, criticizing or, cutting things down, and you say, well, yeah, that may be true, but here's another perspective. They did do this, and you try to, turn it to the positive. I think the big issue, not necessarily the big issue, but a big issue in dealing in toxic workplaces is you get overwhelmed and you just want to give up and you just get passive and you just sort of shrivel up and die, right? And I think you have to start somewhere. It's just do something somewhere with somebody, whether that's, say, a positive thing, and this is sort of, our appreciation at work kinds of stuff. By the way, our website, if people are interested, we got different kinds of, it's appreciation at work, and it's the word .com, and we have toxic stuff and positive things as well. But you start with what you can do, and just sort of faithfully do that. And if you can turn it to a positive, even if it's just like they're talking about how nasty this person was, you say, "Hey, did anybody watch, whatever rugby team you root for, and see what a great game they had, and you just try to get it positive. That's helpful as well, because positivity really throws water sort of on the fire of negativity, and it just sort of douses it. It doesn't mean that it's going to go away, but it at least sort of puts a stop to it and sort of gets people out of a fog.
So the positivity starts with you. It's your reaction. You decide that.
Yeah.
And I really took that out of the book, that you can't control them, but you can control you and can control your reactions. And you talk about some of the strategies to deal with it. So, for example, things like mindfulness and self-talk, your own self-talk needs to change. Could we talk about those things for a moment?
Yeah, and I'm just reminded, John Maxwell, who's sort of a big leadership guru in the States, at least, he said, life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. Bad things happen to us, and most people either do or have worked in a pretty nasty workplace. It's sort of what you do with it. I mean, you can learn with it. Now, you've got to focus on what is good in your life. Like I do trainings and speeches and so forth. And I often start out and say, hey, let's remember why it's a good day. First of all, we all woke up. Okay. We're alive. Okay. Secondly, in the settings where I speak, we had fresh running water. It was safe to drink. It was hot. We had food. We weren't dodging mortars or bullets to get here. There's a lot of email and traffic sucked, but hey, life is good, and in the big picture, we have sight. Most of us, we have hearing. We have all kinds of blessings that we can lose sight of if we just focus on all the little things. And at some point, you have to say, it is what it is. I'm going to make the best of it. Now, at some point, I have to decide whether or not I want to stay here. Because if you think about a toxic environment literally being that it's damaging to you, I mean, it's unhealthy, I think that's true too. And there's some places where you just don't want to stay there too long. And sometimes it takes some longer term planning to get out of that.
Yeah, and you were saying this, that if you stay too long, you can actually damage your career prospects as well. It's not only that you may be institutionalized, for example, in a civil service company, but beyond that, your self-confidence, and it takes a while to heal from the experience you've been through.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I talk to people about when they're in a difficult, if not negative or toxic workplaces, okay, how are you doing as a person? I mean, are you, and it just says health. I mean, are you sleeping okay? When we don't sleep, bad things happen. I mean, there are all kinds of bad, and if you're worrying about stuff or you're uptight and you can't sleep, that's not good. And if you're not exercising and, sort of keeping healthy, and now you got some health problems and your back's bothering you and you're stressed out and you're taking medications just to sort of get through the day, that's not good. And then if you get feedback from your family or friends and say, are you okay? Because you're just sort of grumpy or, irritable, or you're withdrawing from people. I mean, if your relationships aren't healthy, it starts to take a toll on you. And at some point you got to say, is this how I want to live the next 5 or 10 years of my life or whatever it is? And then you got to figure out, okay, what are some action steps I can take to start to explore opportunities? And lots of times we're not going to move to the Tahiti Islands where it's just wonderful, but you at least get in a less damaging place. Lots of times it's stepping stones, right? And you maybe get to a different department where you don't have this nasty leader, or you get away from this really toxic coworker, and then you figure out a way to get out of the organization or whatever. But jumping out sort of just to, all at once is usually not a good idea unless you got some kind of backup plan.
The book is Rising Above a Toxic Workplace. The website is www.appreciationatwork.com/toxic workplaces. And you give a full plethora of tools and articles and videos there for people who may be suffering from this. Because the big thing I felt, Paul, when I read it was like, oh my God, this is, I've heard stories, experienced bits and pieces myself. And you're kind of going, I have to share this story because there are strategies we can take to get ourselves out of it. And it's not worth it. The big thing when you look at why you do this for your family, to put, give your kids a good life, your wife have a good life with her, or your partner, whatever. And you're kind of going, it's not worth damaging my health or being cranky with the people I love most to make money to be with the people I want to be with most, that kind of way.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Insanity loop. Yeah, but it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Paul. I appreciate your time.
Thanks. It's been good, and just to give people hope. You can take care of yourself, and sometimes things, if you take some initial steps, things get better, and the bad people leave. I mean, that happens too. But you don't want to wait too long where you're going down the trail. But you can make your life better. And part of it is keeping a positive attitude and being around positive people, keeping and reading and listening to stuff that helps you grow.
Brilliant. Dr. Paul White, thanks for joining us.
You bet.